I've been married to Stephanie for 7 years. We met in college, fell in love quickly, and got married right after graduation. Everyone says we were the perfect couple. We never fought, always seemed in sync, and even when life got tough, we got through it together. Or so I thought. Looking back, there were signs, small things at first. The way she'd sometimes stay on her phone late at night, face down, with that weird look on her face like she was hiding something. Or when she started going out with the girls more often, claiming she needed a break from work and the house. I didn't think much of it at first. It was always one of those things that I'd brush off, telling myself, I'm just being paranoid. But it wasn't just one thing. It was a combination of little shifts. Like when she started going out more frequently on weekends without me, saying she had to catch up with friends or work late. I wasn't upset, but it felt off. The texts and calls she'd receive, the way she'd quickly glance at me and then hide her phone. Little things, right? But over time, those little things added up. I started to feel like a stranger in my own home. I tried to ignore it. Maybe I was just being insecure. I kept telling myself, I love Stephanie, and she's always been so honest with me. Still, I couldn't shake this nagging feeling in the back of my mind. It started to gnaw at me, and eventually, I couldn't help myself. One night, I decided to check her phone. I know it was a huge violation of trust, but I was desperate. And when I saw the messages between her and a guy named Chris, my heart sank. There were just little things at first. Flirty emojis, the kind of talk that was just a bit too familiar, a little too intimate. But the messages kept going, and I felt like I was sinking deeper into a hole I wasn't sure I wanted to be in. I didn't confront her right away. Couldn't. I was in denial, telling myself I was overreacting. But the longer I sat on it, the worse it felt. I wasn't stupid. I knew what I was reading. That weekend, she had another girls' night planned. But something inside me snapped. I had to know more. I had to confront this head-on, even if I wasn't ready for what I might find. It was a Saturday, the night Stephanie was supposed to be out with her friends again. I'd already planned to take the evening to myself, but instead of staying at home like I'd originally intended, I drove past the bar she was supposed to be at. I wasn't proud of it. Hell, I'm not proud of what I did next. But I parked a little ways down the street, kept the car running, and watched the entrance. The whole time, my stomach was doing flips, like I knew deep down what I was going to find. But I needed the confirmation. I couldn't live in this cloud of uncertainty anymore. I saw her walk out with Chris. She didn't even notice me. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I stayed frozen, watching them talk, laughing together. It wasn't just casual. The way they were standing so close, the way he had his hand on her back, it was all too familiar. I could tell by the way they looked at each other, it wasn't just a friendly thing. And when he leaned in to kiss her on the cheek, that was it. Couldn't breathe. I wanted to storm over there, but something stopped me. The gut-wrenching reality of it all hit me like a freight train. I watched them for a little longer. She didn't see me, but I saw everything I needed to see. I didn't know what to do with myself after that. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing, replaying the images over and over. But what really stuck with me wasn't just the betrayal. It was how damn calm she seemed. It was as if this was just something that had been building up for a while. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept telling myself, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not what it looks like. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't ignore what was staring me in the face. The next day, Stephanie was acting normal, like nothing had changed. It was almost like she was oblivious to the fact that I knew. But I wasn't letting it go. Not anymore. I waited until she went into the shower that afternoon. That's when I grabbed her phone. My heart was racing as I unlocked it, my mind spinning with what I might find. I thought back to the messages I saw before, but this time I didn't stop myself. I scrolled through her conversations with Chris. It was all there, flirty comments, inside jokes, and plans to meet up. But the real gut punch came when I found something else. A picture. A photo she sent to him, taken in our bedroom. I was sleeping when that photo was taken. My mind couldn't process it at first. But then it hit me. This was real. She had been cheating on me. And that's when I saw it. At the bottom of the screen, there was a message from Chris that stopped me in my tracks. It wasn't even that explicit, but the words stuck with me. At the corporate party, my cheating wife snuck away with her lover, then returned to find a gift box on the table smirking. She said my husband's such a naive fool, but I do love his gifts. Little did she know that box marked the beginning of my ruthless revenge that would turn her life into a living nightmare. I stared at the screen, almost unable to breathe. I was staring at my worst fear, the moment where I had unknowingly been the fool. I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch something, but all I could do was sit there, stunned. Couldn't believe it. The evidence was right there in front of me, and it was worse than I imagined. I had been played. I didn't know what to do with myself in that moment. I could feel the anger bubbling up, but I was also overwhelmed. How could we get to this point? When she came out of the shower, I was sitting on the couch, trying to keep my emotions in check. But as soon as she walked into the living room, I could see the way her eyes flicked to my face. She knew something was off. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. "Hey," she said, trying to sound casual. "What's up? You look weird." I looked up at her, my hands shaking, and finally, I just blurted it out. "Who's Chris?" Her face froze for a second, and for a split second, I thought she might just tell me the truth. But then she quickly recovered, trying to play it off. "What are you talking about? Don't lie to me, Steph. I know. I saw the messages. I saw the picture. You and him in our bed." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she laughed. It was almost like she was mocking me. "Oh my God. Are you really doing this right now?" She shook her head, like I was the one being ridiculous. "You're such a fool. I didn't think you'd ever catch on." I felt like my heart was being ripped out of my chest. "You're saying it's true? You're actually admitting it?" She crossed her arms, her gaze shifting away from mine. "You've been so busy with work, always wrapped up in your own little world. I never thought you'd notice. Honestly, I didn't think it would matter. Chris and we just had something that you and I don't anymore. I needed more than what you were giving me." I felt a hot rush of anger. "So what was I to you then? A placeholder? Someone to keep around while you played house with him?" Stephanie didn't respond right away. She stared at the floor, probably avoiding my gaze because she knew how much I was hurting. "Look, I didn't want to hurt you, but things with us have been bad for a while now. You're never around, and when you are, it's like we're strangers. I needed someone who could make me feel alive. You know?" I was shaking now. My whole body was trembling, not from fear, but from a mix of rage and betrayal. "So you just thought you could do this behind my back? For months? And I wouldn't notice. I didn't want to hurt you," she said again, her voice softer now. "But I didn't think you cared. You're always working, always busy with your own stuff. It just happened." It was like a punch to the gut. The way she dismissed me, like I was some inconvenience in her life. "You're unbelievable." We stood there for a long moment, silence hanging thick in the air. She looked like she might cry, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I had already given her everything, and now it felt like I was left with nothing but a hollow shell of a relationship. "Pack your things," I said, my voice cold. "You're leaving. Tonight." She looked shocked, like I just slapped her across the face. "What? You're really kicking me out? After everything?" I didn't flinch. "You betrayed me. You made a fool of me. I can't do this anymore." I could see the anger building in her eyes, but she didn't say anything else. She just turned and walked out of the room, her footsteps heavy. I heard her rummaging through the closet, gathering her things, and I just stood there, feeling numb. I didn't want her back, not after what she'd done, but I couldn't shake this feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was a part of me that wished I had caught on sooner, that I could have stopped this from happening. But that wasn't something I could change now. It wasn't until she left that I realized how much of myself I had given to her. All those years, all the love, all the trust, just gone in a few short sentences. She was gone, but I wasn't sure who I was anymore. I couldn't stop replaying her words over and over in my mind. "I needed more than what you were giving me." It was a dagger to my chest. I thought I was doing everything right. I thought I was being a good husband. But in her eyes, I wasn't enough. I spent the next few days in a fog. I didn't even know what to do with myself. The apartment felt empty. Her absence hit harder than I expected, even though I knew she was the one who left. I kept finding her things around the place. Her perfume on the pillow, her favorite mug still sitting on the counter. It felt like I was suffocating in the memories of what was supposed to be our life. I thought about reaching out to Chris to confront him, but what good would that do? He wasn't the one I was angry with. He was just a symptom of the real problem, her betrayal. And I kept coming back to that message from him, the one that taunted me. Such a naive fool, but I do love his gifts. Little did she know that box marked the beginning of my ruthless revenge. I couldn't help but wonder what he meant by that. What had she really gotten herself into? Days turned into weeks, and the reality of it all started to settle in. I was angry, so angry, but it wasn't just at her. I was angry at myself. I'd let myself be fooled. I'd let my own insecurities slide and had become complacent, thinking everything was fine when it wasn't. I thought I was giving her everything she needed, but maybe I hadn't been the man she wanted. I didn't know how to fix it. I wasn't even sure I wanted to fix it anymore. I started talking to friends, though not about the affair. I told them we were separating, but I left out the messy details. I didn't want to be the guy who aired all his dirty laundry. I didn't want to seem pathetic. But what really hurt was how many of them, my closest friends, the ones I thought would have my back, turned a blind eye when I needed support the most. I realized I was alone in this. My world had shattered, and it was up to me to rebuild it. But how do you rebuild something when the foundation is cracked? How do you move on when the person you trusted the most has betrayed you in ways you didn't even know were possible? I needed an answer. I needed closure, something more than just her leaving and taking her things. It didn't sit right with me. It wasn't enough. I didn't want her back. But I needed to do something. Something that would give me peace. Something that would help me take back control of my life. And then I started thinking. It was subtle at first. A small, dark thought. I didn't want to admit it to myself. But as I sat there, stewing in my anger and resentment, I started to plan. I spent days turning the idea over in my head. I had so many emotions swirling around. I couldn't see straight. Part of me just wanted to forget about Stephanie and move on. But another part of me couldn't shake the feeling that I had been wronged in such a deep, unfair way. And as much as I hated it, I couldn't ignore this burning need for some kind of revenge. It wasn't just about getting back at her. It was about me, about reclaiming my pride, my sense of self-worth. She had walked all over me, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I wasn't going to just let this be something that I'd shove under the rug and pretend didn't happen. I'd been played for a fool, and now it was time to flip the script. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't going to be a petty revenge. It wasn't going to be just confronting her again or calling up Chris and throwing a tantrum. I was done with drama. No, this needed to be calculated, something that would leave a lasting impact. Something that would leave her thinking about what she'd lost, what she'd thrown away. I had no idea where to start. But I had a feeling that this wasn't the end for me. It wasn't the end for my life either. The more I dwelled on it, the more I realized. I had the opportunity to completely turn this around. A part of me was ashamed to admit it, but I had been sitting on something pretty powerful. All the investments I'd made in myself, work, side hustles, connections, I had been quietly building an empire. Stephanie never knew how much I'd been quietly working on my future, and it was time I used it. If I was going to rebuild my life, I was going to do it on my terms, and I wasn't going to do it with her or Chris anywhere near it. I had my revenge, but it wasn't going to look the way she expected. It wasn't about calling her out or doing something petty. No, it was about me. It was about taking everything she took for granted and turning it into something far more powerful than she could have ever imagined. I knew what I had to do next. It wasn't about taking revenge for the sake of pain. It was about proving to myself that I could thrive, that I could rebuild from the wreckage she left behind, that I could rise above this betrayal, stronger and more successful than ever. And as I thought more about it, the clearer my path became. I started with my career. I'd been working in finance for years, but I'd never really pushed myself as hard as I could. I was always just comfortable enough to coast by, to make sure everything seemed fine, never rocking the boat. But now I had something to prove, not to anyone else but to myself. I threw myself into work with a ferocity I hadn't felt in years. I used every connection I had, every opportunity that came my way, and I hustled. It wasn't easy, but I was driven by a single thought. You made a mistake, Stephanie. And now, I'm going to make something incredible out of this. It didn't take long for things to shift. Within a few months, I had a promotion that had been out of reach for years. It wasn't just that, though. I started making moves in the stock market, picking up on trends and investments that turned into solid wins. I felt myself becoming someone different. The man I was before had been too kind, too trusting. But now, I was focused, ruthless. In the meantime, I started distancing myself from people I thought I could trust. Some friends, people I'd known for years, started talking about Stephanie, telling me how heartbroken they were for me. But I didn't need their sympathy. I didn't need their pity. It wasn't what they said. It was the fact that they didn't even question her actions. That's when I realized who my true friends were. The ones who stuck by me, no questions asked, were the ones who earned my trust. The others, I cut them out. Life was too short for that kind of fake support. I continued to build my future, brick by brick. But the best part? I knew exactly how Stephanie would feel when she found out. She had no idea what I was capable of, and I wasn't about to give her that satisfaction. She would see me soaring while she was left behind, stuck in the mess she created. Then I made the final decision. I reached out to a few business investors, people I'd been working on a deal with for a while. There was a huge opportunity on the table, something that would take my career to the next level. The deal was finalized. I'd just become a billionaire. The day the news broke, I was standing in front of the TV when I saw it flash across the screen. Local businessman becomes billionaire with strategic investment in tech industry. I let it sink in for a moment before I picked up my phone and sent Stephanie a message. Guess what? I'm doing well. Really well. You're going to hear about it soon. I'm sure. It wasn't even the money that satisfied me. It was the feeling of control, of having power over the situation that had once left me powerless. The next day, I got a message from her. Is this some sort of joke? She wrote. What do you mean you're a billionaire? And I replied simply, I guess I'm a little better at making things happen than you thought. I didn't hear from Stephanie for a few weeks after that message. I didn't expect to, honestly. She'd reached out a few more times, but I ignored her texts. I couldn't bring myself to care. She had her chance, and now it was my turn to take control. I was busy with the new business ventures, adjusting to this newfound life that felt both surreal and exhilarating. I had a team working under me, making decisions I'd only dreamed about a few months ago. I had everything I needed and everything I wanted, but it didn't come without its own set of challenges. One day, I was walking into the office when I saw a familiar face. It was one of my old friends who I hadn't spoken to since the breakup. He looked almost guilty when he saw me, and I knew right away that something was up. Hey man, he said, his voice hesitant. I've been meaning to reach out. I raised an eyebrow, sensing what was coming next. What's going on? He shifted uncomfortably. Look, Stephanie's been, well, she's been talking about you a lot. I think she really messed up, you know? I mean, we all know what happened. But she didn't mean to hurt you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Did he think I was going to feel sorry for her? Did he really think I was going to buy this attempt at justifying her actions? Cut the crap, I said, my tone firm. I'm not interested in hearing her excuses. She made her choice, and I'm not the one who needs to be convinced of anything. He looked down, nodding. Yeah, I get it. But she's been in a tough place too, man. I think she really regrets it. I shook my head. Well, that's on her. I'm not going back to that life. I've moved on. I've got everything I need now. I didn't want to explain myself further. I didn't need to. My silence, my success, it all spoke louder than any words ever could. And I could see that this, whatever this was, had become my personal victory. Stephanie would hear about it. Everyone would hear about it. They'd see what I was capable of. The thing was, no matter how much I built up my new life, there were still moments where the weight of everything hit me. In the quiet moments, when I was by myself, I sometimes wondered if I'd truly healed. Was the pain really gone, or had I just buried it under all the success and noise? The truth was, I wasn't sure. But I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't going back. Stephanie's betrayal was the fuel that had powered me to this new place, but now it was just a part of my past. A chapter 1 had closed, leaving behind everything she represented. I could have wallowed in self-pity. I could have stayed angry forever, consumed by the need to get revenge. But I realized something. What truly mattered was that I found a way to move on without her. I didn't need her approval, her validation. I had learned, through all the pain and heartbreak, that I could make my life extraordinary on my own. And that's exactly what I did. It's funny. When you're in the midst of betrayal, when the world feels like it's collapsing around you, it's hard to see a way forward. But looking back, I'm grateful for that pain. It forced me to become someone better, stronger, more determined, and most importantly, someone who values themselves above everything else. If you're reading this and you're in a similar situation, I want to say one thing. You don't have to let someone else's choices define your future. I know it hurts. I know it feels like you're drowning in a sea of lies and broken trust. But you can rise above it. You can use the pain to fuel something incredible. Trust me, it's possible. My revenge wasn't in some dramatic outburst or public confrontation. It was in how I chose to rise from the ashes. It was in the life I built after everything had fallen apart. And for me, that was the most powerful thing I could do. Sometimes the best revenge is living well. And in the end, that's exactly what I did.